Focus on the savvy side of 9 to 5 with the Focus Group.
Try, really try.
Listen, laugh, and learn with Tim and John.
I never try anything. I just do it.
Welcome back to the Focus Group. John Nash with my good friend and co-host Tim Bennett. FocusGroupRadio.com is the website that has all the information about our show, audio and video platforms. And, of course, the logos for some of our sponsors, including Deep Discount, which we hope you click through and start some shopping. So joining us now via Skype is Angela Giampolo, my apologies, and she is one of Philadelphia's most accomplished young attorneys, innovative entrepreneurs, and dedicated community leaders. Her legal expertise spans a wide variety of practices, including corporate law, real estate, international law, civil rights, LGBT law, and estate planning. Now, we're going to call our segment with Angela the Outlaw, and we have a special sound effect to go with that. Garrett? There you go, Angela. I told you got a whip crack in there. Welcome to the show. It's good to have you back again. You've joined us before, and you're going to cover a couple things that Tim and I started to outline while we were getting you back on Skype, and it's LGBT issues and politics from the world and from the U.S., but a lot of these stories today are basically U.S. based, right?
Yeah. And before we do that, though, could you tell our audience, for those listening that may not have been familiar with, I think you were on about probably 8 months ago with us, but do you have a little elevator pitch you usually give to people? Because your resume is quite full. You're very busy.
I don't sleep. But yeah, so I live in Philadelphia, and I go by Philly Gay Lawyer. So I have a law firm called Giampolo Law Group, and we service everyone in the law firm. But being Canadian and having started my practice about 12 years ago, I quickly realized that while servicing the LGBT community for all of their legal needs, the fact that we go bankrupt, we slip and fall, we sell real estate, we own businesses, that the fact that the laws were different impacted how I practice law for an LGBT individual versus a heterosexual individual. And so I created sort of a brand separate from my law firm called Philly Gay Lawyer. And that's the brand that I use to do radio segments like this, or books and whatnot. But so I'm an attorney here in Philadelphia servicing the LGBT community, but I have an active advocacy arm where on national issues or international issues, I deal with LGBT-specific issues. And
you write for a bunch of different LGBT periodicals, whether it's regional papers or like Edge Media sort of thing.
Yeah,
and right. And now you're joining us here on the Focus Group, so now you're going to go world famous. And
going viral.
We're going to have to change your name to Angela. I was going to like Angela Merkel. But so before we get into the stories you picked, you have dual citizenship, so you're an American-Canadian. So you're fluent in, obviously, English, and you're fluent in French as well?
Yep. My mom's name is Solange Cassette, very French-Canadian.
Okay, and then I also read in your bio that, are you competent or almost fluent in Mandarin Chinese?
I can order rice and beer. I would say that for the Mandarin language, that is competent.
You could probably say hello, too. I bet you could say, like, ni hao.
Thank you.
Ni hao.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So that's not bad.
So and then John had picked out something which again was tell us about the book you're.
Yeah, I love the new book. So Angela's working on a book, and it says it's about a narrative and pictorial review of your favorite open air rooftop bar and gathering spaces. What a cool idea!
So I think it has something to do with the fact that I'm 4'11", and every time I go to a new city, I naturally, my mom said ever since I was 4 or 5 years old, would gravitate towards the highest vista or view in that particular city. And so now in my older age, it's a shameless excuse to travel because I get to stay at all these hotels comp, but we stay at rooftop bars from around the world, and I write something about them. And I have to try a specialty cocktail that they have. So in Shanghai, for instance, it was a Shanghai Surprise, San Diego, Sunset Cliffs. So the rooftop mixed with a cocktail mixed with shameless excuse to travel.
So we'll put you on the spot. So do you have a favorite rooftop bar in New York City?
New York is hard. New York, there's so many. There's over 80 in the summer. They have like a rooftop hop where they'll do 5 in a night and then do 5 more and then do 5 more. The architect who's actually writing the prologue to the book is Stephen B. Jacobs, who's an architect in New York. And he did what is now the Peninsula, but before it used to be the Gotham. And he's done the Library Hotel, the Gainsbourgs. I would say the Library because I'm a dork. I'm out about my sexuality, but in the closet about my dorkiness.
But what about Philly?
Philly doesn't really have any.
No, the rooftop bars. Don't some of the hotels have a couple? No,
they're not legit rooftops. They're balconies.
Oh.
You know, they're terraces. They wouldn't fit the mold.
So, Angela, I actually went to a wedding that was at the top of the peninsula probably about 4 years ago, and the rooftop space up there was pretty spectacular. The views of Central Park going north, you could look down south to see more of the city. It was pretty, and I'll have to try out the Library Bar. But let's get back on.
Yeah, all right.
Garrett, crack the whip for us. There you go. Time to get back on track.
So the first story we wanted to talk about was one that surprised me. It came out of Utah, and the title was "Utah Judge Rules Lesbian Couple are legally married months after one of them had died." So what happened? What was that story about?
So and it's not as surprising as you would think. Why it was very surprising for Utah is they do not and have never not recognized common law marriage. So we've had several of these situations in Pennsylvania, but what happened was the test for common law marriage is that you have the intent to live together as married, that you do so, that you put yourself out to the world as that. And for 50 years did that and ultimately never got married in life. Very, very, if you read the articles, 2 very sick women. The one who survived had 29 back surgeries. She's blind, double leg amputation. I mean, and the caretaker of her got sick with emphysema, and ultimately the double amputee ended up taking care of her in her old age, or in her dying years, rather. But so they never legally got married. And a friend of the woman who's a lawyer said, I've been seeing this in a few other states. We could petition the court to retroactively acknowledge that you did, in fact, get married, and the court can issue a decree saying so. And I've done that a couple times here in Pennsylvania, but in Utah, that's unheard of. And so after 50 years, now she's blind, mind you, in court, the judge issues his ruling, and she just doesn't think she heard correctly and starts crying, and the judge actually got off the bench, came down, hugged her, and repeated the ruling to her. And there's some video of it. It's very, very chilling. It was amazing.
Wow.
Why do you because this is, whether it's same-sex couples or straight couples that have lived together like this as common law, why didn't they, I just wonder why they didn't get married. Did they just not get around to it? Right.
So as an advocate, I completely 100 wholeheartedly disagree with this ruling. So Philly Gay Lawyer disagrees with this from a rule of law standpoint. And I've given a seminar to 500 judges in Pennsylvania, and I caution them against doing this. And at the end of one of the articles I read, nobody was sure.
Oops. Right.
Or a date they got married, or that they exchanged vows, rather, back in like 1990 something. And the judge said, let's choose 2015 or 2013 to keep it less messy. On the record, he said, to keep it less messy. In Pennsylvania, we have a mess with this now. There are divorce lawyers, because Pennsylvania recognized common law the latest out of every state in the country, 2005. Other than that, we're looking at 1997. I know people that were in relationships predating 2005. And so divorce lawyers are saying, well, in 97, you had this huge ceremony, horse-drawn carriage, whatnot. We're saying you're married, so now I get half your retirement. So right now we have common law divorce issues in Pennsylvania. I mean, but this judge wanted to do what's right, and he goes to bed happy at night, and she's happy. But from a rule of law perspective, from a jurisprudential perspective, I 100% disagree.
Interesting. And so to Tim's question, had they taken the time to actually even get someone to come to their home and just do the ceremony there and say, now you're wife and wife, whatever, that would have at least solidified it legally, and it would not have had to go the common law route, right, which Angela's saying is something she doesn't agree with. So interesting. All right. So the next bit I've been seeing percolate up in the news quite a lot, and that's a record number of LGBTQ candidates are running for office this year. It's the midterms. Christine Hallquist became the first openly transgender gubernatorial candidate for a major party recently as well. So this is an interesting trend, and it seems that some of these candidates are actually succeeding based on their positions and what they're up to, right?
Yeah.
I wonder, is this all there's an awful lot in the news talked about that this is happening because of the kind of a backlash to the current administration. So do you think, I know a record number of women were running, but do you also think it has also it kind of funneled over into the LGBT community as well then?
I think it's a combo of that. I mean, I feel like the LGBT community has always seen itself as an ally to any minority experiencing discrimination. So obviously, everyone empathizes with the migrant children and Muslims on the Muslim ban, and women and their right to choose, and everything that's been on the butcher block during this administration. And there are gay people amongst all of those segments, right? Like one of my favorite candidates that I back because she won't win, but I love her, is Lupe Valdez, sheriff running for governor in Texas, And she says being a lesbian is just a small part of who I am. I'm a woman, I'm Latina, I'm this. So I feel like the record number of LGBT candidates, which is actually quite small. I think the last statistic said there's 559 LGBT, openly gay or LGBTQ identifying candidates in office, and that only makes up 0.1% of all elected officials.
Wow. 0.1%.
And right now we have 400 running, so there's 559 in office and almost exactly that much. So maybe we'll make up 0.2 come November, but the stats said we would need 23,000 openly LGBTQ identifying candidates to have a true representative makeup of the 3% that we make up of the country.
Wow, John and I have another media property called TFG Unbuttoned, and I think we talked about it there. I was reading similar story to this here, where there are 6 candidates, either 6 or 8 candidates in Connecticut running for state office, that are all gay, that are Republicans, which was so.
Maybe they're old style Republicans.
Old style Republicans.
So, do you want to take this last one, Tim? Or
so the last story was, and I've looked at this and I've kind of danced around it, but it says the title was "Proposed Ohio Bill Would Force Teachers to Out Transgender Teens."
Is that
I can't see you dancing.
Angela, just the phrase "a bill would force teachers to out transgender teens," is that even within the rights of an individual to do that? I mean, how are they couching this? Because it's a minor and it's a teacher somehow? Because
it's a state employee, and so the legislatures can. So it's only certain state employees. So it wouldn't necessarily. If you're in a private school, chances are it's either religious in some way, shape, or form. So it really hits all public schools. So they're state-funded employees, and the legislature can now dictate that.
So would this be the sort of thing whereas if you were a questioning youth and you went into your guidance counselor or the school nurse or psychologist, whatever, and had a conversation with them and said, I'm having this, I feel I may be trans, this then takes it the next step where it's, well, I've got to call your parents rather than keeping that. So is that the issue here?
Right. I mean, if you hear a lot in the law, the threshold is knew or should have known. And it's placing that threshold on these employees. So oftentimes, and a lot of people that I've spoken to over the last couple of months about this bill, because I came out very young, so I didn't necessarily have this struggle of wanting to confide in someone other than necessarily my parents. But a lot of people went to their guidance counselor. A lot of people went to the school nurse that knew them. You're there 8 hours a day. You develop a relationship. You trust them. And you sense that there's a lack of confidentiality, that when you go home, what you said at school to the guidance counselor stays at school. And now it would be a 4th-degree criminal felony if it came out that that one of these employees did not notify both parents.
So this is a slippery slope then, because we know that this teen suicide rate, particularly for trans kids, is off the charts.
Yeah,
so
40%.
Right. So if you said if the unfortunate situation happens and somebody did commit suicide, the family then would have recourse to go back after the school employee for not telling them that their kid was trans?
Right, in some perverse way, the very suicide that was created from not being able to transition could come back on the teacher that didn't break the confidentiality. But like you said, the suicide rates are off the charts, 40% under the age of 24 attempt suicide. And one of the most internationally renowned, well-known suicide notes is from a teenager in Ohio, a 16-year-old, where the parents, every time she came out, Leila Akron, every time she came out in one way, shape, or form, they would isolate her. So she came out, they homeschooled her. She came out as trans, they sent her to a conversion therapy camp. And ultimately, she got to a point from the age of 14 to 16 that she was totally isolated, no social media, no friends, no school, no nothing. And she wrote a very compelling note, basically blaming that isolation, blaming her parents, and hoping that her suicide note would help change things. And in her very own state, we now have this.
But so, Angela, the story that you just outlined, the way I heard it, I'm not sure that the bill that Ohio's implementing would have solved that particular suicide, because she came out to multiple people, parents, she came out as trans, and they sought to remove her from society in many ways. And I can imagine that a lot of, an attorney like yourself would look at a bill like this and see lots of what they call unintended consequences. Sounds good. We're going to this is a horrible number. We have 40% of these individuals attempting suicide yearly. This may help by forcing a public employee to disclose that information if they know it, but I'm sure that something's going to come out of this the opposite way of an unintended consequence. Well,
a big part of the bill is without a law saying otherwise, without a state law saying otherwise, the international standards of when you can transition, you can make that decision prior to 18 years old. States differ from anywhere from 15, 16, and 18. So this makes it 18. So it makes the parents the be-all, end-all. It makes every single child in Ohio the same as that child who had unfortunate parents that isolated her. So if this bill did not become legislation and I were trans living in Ohio and I had unsupportive parents, I could seek out resources at school, talk to adults that normalize me, get it out somewhere, and be safe in a safe place in a gay student alliance and with teachers and whatnot, and eventually, and maybe black market or without my parents knowing, start taking tea and start transitioning at 16, because the whole point is you want to do it before puberty. I mean, that's what changes all kids' lives, is if you can hit it before puberty. But either way, if I can escape high school and get out of Ohio with some supportive adults in my corner, which the guidance counselors and teachers tend to be, then I have a chance of living. Right now, it takes every single adult that I could potentially come in contact with in school or at home off my table.
Wow.
Legally.
Wow.
Do you think this will be a trend with other states, or is this just happening in Ohio right now?
Unfortunately, Ohio is a big enough state. The same states look to each other: Indiana, Mississippi, Oklahoma, Ohio, North Carolina. They all kind of look at each other. Another one has not popped up, and it's been 3 months. I think they're waiting to see, but there's also not a lot of news about it. So I think if this passed the House and got any sort of traction, we would see national news one way or both good and bad.
Jeez. Well, on that happy note.
I know.
we did have a lighthearted one where we were trying to get you hooked up. We were talking about, but it's been in the news, and it was Bert and Ernie are gay was the headline, and I was even watching the Today Show this morning, and I believe the writer that wrote the characters for Sesame Street, and he said that they were modeled after he and his partner. He felt as he wrote their relationship for the two characters, Bert and Ernie. But Sesame Street seems to be pushing back pretty hard. Today in the news, it was that these puppets have no gender. They're just friends. They're just best friends. What do you think?
I think both can be true. I'm glad.
Spoken like an attorney.
Spoken like an attorney.
Litigant.
I'm glad that the writer came out and said that. I mean, it really put context to a debate that's been going on forever. I remember when marriage equality happened, the New Yorker asked for a Sesame episode where they would both be in bed watching the Supreme Court, oral arguments and whatnot. So this has been a long, long, long debate. And ultimately, I mean, I don't know why Sesame Street's coming out so against it. But I did read one comment that I liked, and it said, it reminds me a lot of Pat from Saturday Night Live. Does Pat have to be a man or a woman? How about we all just look and see how it makes us feel? And little kids, they see a good, loving, potentially platonic, potentially not. But at the end of the day, there's nothing but love there, and love always wins. So
there you go.
I think you can spin it any which way.
And that's a good point to move on from. Because it's a happy point.
It's a happy point. It's funny you brought up Pat. My old career, I worked for Subaru of America, and we were launching the Outback. And one of the characters, other than using Paul Hogan, was going to be Pat from Saturday Night Live, because no one knew if it was a car or a truck.
Oh, that's a real leap.
I thought it was hilarious. Of course,
it's great, but it's a leap, man.
I think Paul Hogan worked out better.
Yeah,
Crocodile Dundee. Hey, Angela, we want to thank you for joining us. We've got an end slide graphic of you, which has your email address and your business address, which is giampololaw.com, I believe. Yep. And so if people want to contact you, and there goes the web.
The outlaw.
And that part's free.
Right. We also have this on Facebook, and we'll be posting this on the YouTube feed and the Facebook feed as well for people to catch up. So we want to thank you for joining us for this inaugural voyage.
Maiden
voyage. And even though we had a little bit of glitch in the beginning, but I think we got it fixed.
And it's going to be a crazy ride.
Yeah.
Thank you, Angela.
Thank you. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we have a quick shop talk, and John asked the question: could you live on $37,000 a year
retirement?
And we have a couple of ideas for that. So stay tuned.